Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun!
The air was thick with anticipation as the office held its collective breath, all eyes gravitating towards the projector screen. Kendrick, seated at the periphery, felt a familiar anxiety stirring in his chest. His gaze flicked across the room, avoiding the incriminating figures displayed before them. The vibrant colors of the sales chart seemed to mock him, showcasing the success of a rival he'd secretly envied. Valerie. He was stuck in the monotonous rhythm of conservative decision-making, his team's performance stagnating by a widening gap.
Let the celebration commence.
Roger's cheerful voice echoed through the room, his joy laced with a subtle hint of malice.
Time to fulfill the friendly bet we all eagerly agreed on.
Kendrick, typically unflappable, felt a strange mixture of emotions. His fingers fidgeted with the navy tie he'd worn countless times, a physical manifestation of his unease. Now, he understood why.
Kendrick's team will be fulfilling their end of the bargain,
Roger continued, turning to face the rigid analyst.
For the next month, you gentlemen will be coming to work in full makeup, as requested by Valerie's winning team.
Scattered applause and laughter rippled through the room. Kendrick's face burned beneath his meticulously trimmed brown beard. The same beard that would soon be framed by lipstick. His stomach twisted.
This is ridiculous,
he muttered to his colleague, Michael.
We're financial analysts, not theater performers.
Michael shrugged, seemingly unbothered.
It's just makeup, man. My wife says I'd look good with a little something to hide these bags under my eyes anyway.
That evening, Kendrick sat stiffly on his couch in his pristine downtown apartment, laptop balanced on his knees as he typed minimal men's makeup into the search bar. The results were sparse and unhelpful. After an hour of increasingly frustrated research, he slammed the laptop shut and grabbed his keys. The bright lights of the drugstore made his already pounding headache worse. He stood awkwardly in the cosmetics aisle, trying to make sense of the overwhelming array of products.
Can I help you find something?
Kendrick turned to see a store employee watching him with professional curiosity. I need some makeup. For a work thing. His voice sounded strangled. The woman, her name tag read Diana, nodded without judgment.
What kind of look are you going for?
Invisible, Kendrick replied immediately. The absolute bare minimum. Diana smiled. Let's start with tinted moisturizer and maybe some clear mascara. Nothing dramatic, just enough to say you're participating. 30 minutes and $78 later, Kendrick left with a small bag containing what Diana had assured him were the most subtle products possible. He felt ridiculous, a grown man buying makeup for a workplace humiliation. The next morning, he stood in his bathroom, staring at his reflection as he attempted to apply the tinted moisturizer. His hands were unsteady, making the application streaky and uneven. The clear mascara was even worse. He jabbed himself in the eye twice before getting anything on his lashes. When he arrived at work, wearing his standard charcoal suit and blue tie, he hoped no one would notice the minimal makeup. That hope evaporated as soon as he reached his desk. "Oh, honey, that is not makeup," Valerie said, appearing beside him with a coffee in hand. Her red blazer matched her confident smile. "That's barely moisturizer."
The bet was makeup,
Kendrick replied stiffly.
This is makeup.
Not in my book. She gestured to her colleagues Melissa and Patricia, who approached with suspicious-looking cosmetic bags.
Girls, our friend here needs some help fulfilling his obligation.
Before Kendrick could protest, they had guided him to the small conference room and closed the door. This is completely unprofessional, he objected, as Melissa laid out an array of products on the table. No, what's unprofessional is trying to weasel out of a fair bet, Patricia countered, gesturing for him to sit. Now, hold still. For the next 15 minutes, Kendrick endured what felt like torture as the women applied foundation, powder, blush, eyeshadow, and finally, coral lipstick to his face. Perfect, Valerie declared, holding up a compact mirror. Professional enough for the office, but definitely makeup. Kendrick stared at his reflection in horror. His skin looked flawless, his eyes enhanced, and his lips were an undeniable shade of coral. He looked like himself, but different, polished in a way he'd never been before. I can't go out there like this, he whispered. You absolutely can and will, Valerie replied, opening the conference room door. A bet's a bet, Kendrick. Walking back to his desk felt like crossing a minefield. Every eye in the office seemed to follow him. Some colleagues smirked. Others looked away awkwardly. Michael, also sporting a full face of makeup courtesy of Valerie's team, gave him a sympathetic nod. By lunchtime, Kendrick hadn't left his desk once. He'd responded to emails with furious efficiency, trying to lose himself in work rather than think about the makeup on his face. When his phone rang, he answered without looking up. Wilson speaking. Kendrick, it's Harriet from the Fujikawa account. I need those projection reports before end of day. Kendrick froze. Harriet was one of their most conservative clients. I'll send them over right away. Excellent. And I'll need you on the video call at 3 to explain the discrepancies in last quarter's numbers. Video call? His voice cracked. Could we possibly do a conference call instead? I'm having some camera issues. My team prefers face-to-face. 3 o'clock, Kendrick. The line went dead. Kendrick buried his face in his hands, then quickly pulled them away, remembering the makeup. He rushed to the bathroom to assess the damage and was surprised to find his makeup still perfectly intact. The video call with Harriet was the longest 45 minutes of Kendrick's life. He'd considered wiping off the makeup before the call, but Roger had walked by his desk minutes before, giving him a pointed look that said the bet would be enforced. To Kendrick's shock, Harriet didn't mention his appearance once, focusing entirely on the business at hand. When she finally said, Your analysis is as impeccable as always, Kendrick, he felt an unexpected surge of relief? Pride? By the end of that first day, Kendrick's face felt strangely tight from the makeup, but he had survived. In the privacy of his apartment, he carefully removed everything following the instructions Diana had provided, watching as his familiar face reappeared. Day 2 was marginally easier. He attempted to apply the makeup himself, with mixed results. Valerie took one look at him, sighed dramatically, and dragged him back to the conference room for a touch-up that was more of a complete redo. You need to blend this better, she explained, demonstrating with a makeup sponge. And your eyeliner is uneven. Here, watch how I do it. Despite himself, Kendrick paid attention. He'd always been a quick study. It was what made him good at financial analysis. Patterns, techniques, systematic applications. Makeup, he realized with some surprise, followed similar principles. By the end of the first week, Kendrick could apply his own foundation, blush, and mascara with reasonable competence. The lipstick still gave him trouble, but Patricia had shown him how to use lip liner to create a more precise application. Something else happened that week. A client he'd been courting for months finally signed a contract after their face-to-face meeting.
You seem different,
the client had remarked. More confident. I like that in a financial advisor. Kendrick had blinked in surprise. Confident was the last thing he felt with coral lipstick and mascara. Yet the numbers didn't lie. He'd closed more deals in the past week than in the previous month. As the second week began, Kendrick found himself in the department store during lunch, being color-matched for a higher-end foundation by a professional makeup artist.
Your undertones are warm,
the consultant explained, testing another shade on his jawline.
This one will look more natural. I need something that lasts all day,
Kendrick heard himself saying.
I have a lot of meetings.
The consultant nodded approvingly.
This one has 12-hour wear, and with a setting spray, you'll be perfect from 9 to 9.
Kendrick left with a bag of products and a strange feeling of anticipation about trying them the next day. By the third week, something fundamental had shifted. Kendrick no longer waited for Valerie or her team to fix his makeup. Instead, he arrived at work with a flawlessly applied face that sometimes earned approving nods from the women in the office. His morning routine had extended by 20 minutes, but he found the process almost meditative. That shade of nude lipstick works better with your coloring than the coral, Melissa commented one morning. Good choice. Kendrick had smiled, a genuine smile that felt unfamiliar on his face. Thanks. The coral was a bit much for client meetings. When had he started making decisions about what lipstick was appropriate for which setting? It was during that third week that Kendrick first ventured beyond the bet's requirements. The department store had been having a sale, and he'd found himself drawn to a display of silk blouses. Without overthinking it, he'd purchased a cream-colored one that the salesperson assured him could be styled in a professional, understated way. The next day, he paired the blouse with his usual tailored slacks and added a slim-fitting blazer. The overall effect was subtle, but undeniably different from his usual button-downs and ties.
New look?
Roger asked when they passed in the hallway, eyebrows raised. Kendrick had nodded, bracing for mockery. Instead, Roger had simply said,
Looks good. The Peterson clients are in the main conference room whenever you're ready.
That meeting had gone exceptionally well. Kendrick had felt a strange new confidence as he presented the portfolio options, aware of how the silk blouse softened his usually rigid demeanor. The Petersons, a wealthy couple in their 60s, had responded warmly, signing on for the comprehensive package rather than the basic option he'd expected them to choose. As the end of the month approached, and with it, the end of the bet, Kendrick found himself experiencing an unexpected anxiety. The thought of returning to his former self, bare-faced and in traditional men's business attire, filled him with a peculiar dread. On the last official day of the bet, Valerie stopped by his desk. Well, tomorrow you're a free man, she said, leaning against his desk. Back to the old Kendrick. He looked up from his computer, aware of the perfect winged eyeliner he'd finally mastered that morning. Yeah, he said, without enthusiasm. Valerie studied him with unexpected gentleness. Unless you don't want to go back? What do you mean? Kendrick, I've been watching you these past weeks. You've changed, and not just on the outside. You're more engaged with clients, more present in meetings. Your sales numbers have improved by 23%. She smiled. The makeup was supposed to be a silly forfeit, but it seems like you found something that works for you. Kendrick swallowed hard. It's not just the makeup. I don't know how to explain it. You don't have to explain it to me, Valerie replied. But maybe you need to explain it to yourself. That night, Kendrick sat in his apartment surrounded by the makeup and clothing purchases he'd accumulated over the past month. His fingers traced over the silky fabric of a plum blouse he'd bought but hadn't yet worn to the office. Next to it, lay a catalog from the department store, open to a page of women's blazers he'd circled. For the first time in his life, Kendrick allowed himself to acknowledge the feelings he'd suppressed for so long. The rigid masculinity he'd maintained wasn't just a professional choice. It had been a cage, one that, for the past month, he'd been slowly stepping out of. The next morning, decision made, Kendrick, who had started privately thinking of herself as Aspen after her favorite winter destination, arrived at the office in the plum blouse, paired with tailored black slacks and low heels. Her makeup was flawless, subtle eyeshadow, perfect liner, and a mauve lipstick that complemented her brown hair, which she'd styled slightly differently, allowing it to fall softer around her face. The office fell quiet as she walked to her desk. Then Roger appeared, coffee in hand.
"The bet's over, Wilson,"
he said, confusion evident in his voice. "I know," Aspen replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "This isn't about the bet anymore." Roger studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly.
"Okay then. The Johansson portfolio needs reviewing by noon."
"It'll be on your desk by 11, Aspen promised. As Roger walked away, Valerie approached, a warm smile on her face. "Nice blouse," she said simply. "Thanks," Aspen replied. "I have a lot to learn about all of this." "Well, you've got my number if you need advice, or shopping company." Valerie paused. "And just so you know, HR has a good policy on gender expression in the workplace. I checked." The gesture of support brought unexpected tears to Aspen's eyes, threatening her carefully applied mascara. "Thank you," she whispered. The weeks that followed weren't without challenges. Some colleagues were confused, others supportive, a few uncomfortable. Clients sometimes did a double take during meetings, but Aspen's exceptional work continued to speak for itself. Her wardrobe expanded gradually, more blouses, several women's blazers in various colors, slacks cut to flatter her figure. Her brown hair, which she'd always kept short, she allowed to grow, developing a style that framed her face in a softer, more feminine way. By the time November arrived, Aspen was presenting as female full-time. She'd consulted with HR about her transition, chosen her new name officially, and updated her email signature. The company had been surprisingly supportive, with Roger even approving a training session for the entire floor about respectful workplace behavior.
"You've become our top performer,"
he'd told her privately after she'd closed the largest account of the quarter.
"Whatever journey you're on, the company supports good business, and you're very good for business."
As the holiday season approached, the office buzzed with excitement about the annual Christmas party. It was always a formal affair, held at an upscale hotel downtown, with spouses invited and an open bar that led to the inevitable embarrassing moments preserved in office lore. Aspen had attended these parties for years as Kendrick, always in the same conservative black suit, always nursing one whiskey all night, always leaving by 10. This year would be different in every way. The night of the party, Aspen stood in front of her full-length mirror, hardly recognizing the woman who stared back. She'd had her makeup professionally done at the department store, a subtle, smoky eye that enhanced her brown eyes, illuminating highlighter on her cheekbones, and a deep berry lip that looked festive without being overpowering. Her brown hair, now reaching just below her chin, had been styled in soft waves, but it was the dress that transformed her completely. An emerald sequined sheath that hugged her figure, which had been gradually changing with hormone therapy. The dress caught the light with every movement, shifting between deep forest green and brilliant jade. For the first time, Aspen felt fully aligned, inside and out. The person in the mirror wasn't a disguise or a costume. It was simply her. The hotel ballroom was decorated with twinkling lights and evergreen garlands. When Aspen entered, conversations paused briefly as colleagues took in her appearance. She spotted Valerie by the bar and made her way over. "You look absolutely stunning," Valerie said, handing her a glass of champagne.
"That color is perfect on you."
"Thanks," Aspen replied, accepting the glass.
"It took me 3 shopping trips to find the right dress." "Well, it was worth every minute."
Valerie glanced around the room.
"Everyone is noticing in a good way."
Throughout the evening, Aspen moved through the party with newfound confidence. Colleagues who had been awkward around her in the early days of her transition now chatted easily. Several people complimented her dress. The Peterson clients, who were major enough to warrant an invitation, specifically sought her out to discuss expanding their portfolio in the new year. Just before midnight, Roger clinked his glass for attention. The room quieted as he stepped onto the small stage. "Before we wrap up this wonderful evening, I want to acknowledge some exceptional achievements from the past year," he announced. "First, our overall department growth of 18%, which is unprecedented." Applause filled the room. "And secondly, I'd like to recognize our top performer, who has shown us all what courage, authenticity, and excellence look like." Aspen felt her cheeks warm as Roger's gaze found her in the crowd.
Aspen Wilson has not only outperformed every analyst in terms of client acquisition and retention, but she's done so while navigating a personal journey with grace and professionalism. In my 20 years in this business, I've never seen such transformation, both personal and professional. Aspen, would you join me?
Heart pounding, Aspen made her way to the stage, the emerald dress catching the light with each step. As she accepted the small crystal award from Roger, the applause was deafening. "Would you like to say a few words?" Roger asked, offering her the microphone. Aspen hadn't prepared for this. She looked out at the sea of faces, colleagues who had witnessed her journey from the beginning, clients who had stayed with her through the changes, Valerie and her team who had unknowingly set her on this path with a silly bet about makeup. "A year ago," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I thought I knew exactly who I was and where my life was heading. I had everything planned and controlled. Then I lost a departmental competition." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "What seemed like a humiliating forfeit turned out to be the most liberating experience of my life. I discovered that the person I had been suppressing, the person I truly am, was so much stronger, happier, and yes, better at financial analysis than the person I was pretending to be." She took a breath, aware of the complete silence in the room. "I want to thank this company for seeing me, the real me, and valuing my work regardless of my appearance or gender. I want to thank my colleagues for their support, especially Valerie and her team, who taught me how to blend foundation properly." More laughter, warmer this time. "And I want to thank my clients, many of whom are here tonight, for their loyalty and for judging me solely on my ability to grow their investments." Aspen raised her glass. "Here's to authenticity, to growth, and to finding yourself in the most unexpected places, even in a bet about makeup." The room erupted in applause and cheers. As Aspen stepped down from the stage, she was engulfed by well-wishers. Patricia hugged her tightly. Michael, who had gone right back to his clean-shaven face the minute the bet ended, gave her a respectful nod. Later, as the party wound down, Aspen found herself standing by the large windows overlooking the city lights. Valerie joined her, champagne in hand. "Penny for your thoughts," she said. Aspen smiled. "I was just thinking about how much has changed in a year. Last Christmas, I was miserable without even knowing it." "And now?" "Now I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be." Aspen touched the emerald fabric of her dress. "It's strange to think it all started with coral lipstick." Valerie laughed. "Coral lipstick that you refused to wear properly for at least 3 days. In my defense, it was a terrible color for my skin tone." "True. You're definitely more of a berry or mauve girl." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the snow begin to fall outside. "What happens next?" Valerie asked eventually. Aspen considered the question. "Professionally, I want to keep building my client base. I'm thinking of specializing in sustainable investments. There's a growing market there. And personally, I'm taking it one day at a time." Aspen replied honestly. "There's still so much to learn, to experience. But for the first time in my life, I'm excited about the journey." "Well," Valerie said, raising her glass, "here's to journeys, and to the best financial analyst I know, who also happens to have excellent taste in emerald dresses." Aspen clinked her glass against Valerie's. "And to friends who know when to push you out of your comfort zone, even if it's disguised as a ridiculous workplace bet." As they laughed together, Aspen caught her reflection in the window, the sequins of her dress twinkling like stars, her makeup still perfect, her brown hair framing a face that finally felt like her own. The quiet joy that filled her had nothing to do with winning awards or closing deals. It was simpler and more profound, the peace that comes from finally being yourself. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in a blanket of possibility. For Aspen Wilson, who had discovered her true self in the most unexpected way, each snowflake represented a new beginning, one she was finally ready to embrace.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!